With the theory of forms, people push hard to improve the status quo, and with this idea driving scientific innovations, sometimes we end up with inventions like bubblegum and hydrogenated vegetable oil. In the years before World War II, the whole world was going through an economic crisis, and even Americans were struggling. Prices were soaring, and everyday necessities such as butter were getting way too expensive. Butter was a must-have to have on every family's dining table, so a bunch of scientists in the lab came up with this fake butter, which we now call hydrogenated vegetable oil. Sure, you may use it in place of butter, but once you eat it, your body cannot break it down. Fast forwarding to this century, 2 doctors and a scientist decided to experiment on themselves. They wanted to see what would happen if they only ate hydrogenated vegetable oil for a whole month. Guess what? It really messed up their livers. As a result, Denmark stepped up and passed a law banning hydrogenated vegetable oil in the whole country. But here I am, consuming it on a daily basis, since it is still in Nestle coffee, which I love for its convenience. When I did some digging and found out it contains hydrogenated vegetable oil, I freaked out a little. But hey, I thought, the amount I consume is not a lot, right? In China, whenever we have things like cream in our diet, we often come across hydrogenated vegetable oil because we do not have a law against it. Nowadays, a lot of food safety problems originate from the fact that none of them existed in the natural world. You know what is even more frightening? Einstein cracked the code with E=mc². Theoretically, his work paved the way for the atomic bomb, right? It is crazy to think that packed within a teensy-weensy bit of matter is an insane amount of energy. That little mass, m, multiplied by the speed of light squared, represents the sheer power we are talking about. Under the influence of Plato's theory of forms, humanity went ahead and played around with nuclear energy. Forget about using nuclear energy. We should stick to the good old energy from the sun. Why? Well, there is a rule when it comes to using nuclear energy: it has to be done safely. Okay, let's put aside the whole nuclear weapons debate for a second. Let's say we got rid of all the nukes, but we still want to use nuclear energy peacefully, like in nuclear power plants. Even so, nuclear power plants and other ways to harness nuclear power can bring some serious risks. Why? Humans make mistakes. We all admit that we are far from perfect. It is a fact. It has been discussed in philosophy and religion. Just because we have logical reasoning skills does not mean that we are invincible and flawless. It is impossible to achieve absolute perfection. We are all flawed beings, living in a world full of uncertainties. When it comes to using nuclear energy, one wrong move can have disastrous consequences that we cannot fix. On March 11, 2011, the Fukushima nuclear accident happened at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in Okuma, Fukushima, Japan. As a result, radioactive contaminants were released into the surrounding areas. It was a big deal, and it showed us something important: there is not much we can do about it. Apparently, some nuclear contaminants ended up in the ocean, and we have no clue what kind of mess that might cause down the line. What does this all mean? Well, it is clear that the theory of forms had its moments and achieved significant milestones. However, there are also major dangers lurking within those achievements. The theory of forms has also helped build a social order that follows ideal principles. Nowadays, we really value the rational social order found in the West. It is no longer like the old days when social order was based on religious laws. Social life is no longer wrapped up in mystical beliefs or spiritism. Social organizations are no longer about climbing up some ladder, they are more about creating a level playing field. Every social order, every organization, and every group is structured with reason in mind. Why has everyone jumped on board with the logical method of organizing everything? It all boils down to one reason: efficiency. We have embraced this type of social order, its internal structure, and its systems of organization because it boosts efficiency and makes arrangements in life easier. Basically, we have taken the spiritual aspects out of the social world and made it more practical and efficient. The theory of forms has two consequences, one of which manifests through our relationship with nature, and the other one through our relationships with each other. That being said, we do not mean to say that Western civilization is bad and full of problems. We acknowledge the many benefits it has brought us, such as the technology that has made our lives better. Thanks to progress in technology, we are not just sitting around waiting for nature to provide anymore. Chinese civilization aced the agricultural game, taking it to the next level. Even so, they were still at the mercy of Mother Nature when it came to survival. In the era of Chinese dynasties, the emperor had this annual tradition of praying to the heavens with all the officials. In Beijing, there is this temple of heaven where the emperor and his officials prayed for adequate rainfall all year long. It just goes to show that they were still under nature's thumb, no matter how well developed their agricultural civilization was. Let's dig into Western civilization and go back to its origins, the geographical features that influenced the religious beliefs and myths of ancient Greece, which then sparked the unique aspects of Western philosophy and the ongoing distinction between two worlds. From the perspective of religion, truth is believed to exist in heaven. From a philosopher's point of view, truth exists in the world of forms. In either case, truth is found on the other side, the other realm, which is superior to the world we live in. Therefore, Westerners reform this world by adhering to the principles from that other realm. That is the core attitude of Western civilization. It forms the basic framework that shapes their understanding of the world. We are well aware of the characteristics of Western culture, which we can just call Platonism for simplicity. We understand its significant impact on history and the world, reaching far beyond Europe, its place of origin. Now, let's return to the discussion about what makes Chinese culture so unique, especially when it comes to philosophy. There is no real religion in China. For example, though China has adapted Buddhism into its culture, Buddhism is not a religion in the strict sense. It is non-theistic, more like a way of life. For example, the Buddha emphasized the practical and philosophical aspects of his teachings over religious dogma and worshipping of gods and goddesses. It is only in the folk customs and rituals that Buddhism has taken on the idea of gods and their images. When Chinese Buddhists visit a Buddhist temple, they bow down to a bodhisattva or a Buddha statue, and they pray and ask for help in some areas of life, such as better health, a successful career, etc. They light incense, make wishes, and promise to do something in return. Even for non-Buddhists in China, this kind of visit to a Buddhist temple is rather common, especially before important exams like the nationwide unified examination for admissions to general universities and colleges. Some of us might even take a trip to somewhere farther away, like the temple on Mount Putua, to up our chances of acing those exams. If our exams went well, we had better not forget to revisit the temple, pay our respect, and thank the gods with our votive offerings. If this sounds like bribery to you, I feel the same way. This whole worshipping practice stems from the folk beliefs related to Buddhism, creating this idea of a divine realm with Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and arhats. But actually, they are not gods at all, they are just regular people just like you and me. You see, when one reaches a certain level of spiritual enlightenment through practicing Buddhism, that person goes through stages like becoming an arhat, then a bodhisattva, and finally, a Buddha. But they do not become a god. Siddhartha Gautama, also known as Shakyamuni Buddha, was just an ordinary person. The word Buddha in Sanskrit means awakened one. Therefore, a Buddha is someone who has fully awakened. We do not recognize or understand the Buddha because we have not yet awakened, but we all have the potential to awaken. This core value in Buddhism explains why Buddhism is non-theistic. Here is a cool story from Zen Buddhism. One day, a Buddhist disciple just could not hold back his question anymore and asked his enlightened Zen master, "Master, can you please tell me, where is the Buddha exactly?" The master replied, "The Buddha is right in front of you. Everyone who is listening to you talk and teach about the Buddha is the Buddha." Just then, the student had a moment of epiphany. The nature of the Buddha nature is not a godly nature, but it lies within all of us. We are all potential Buddhas, just waiting to awaken. In China, on New Year's Day, we usually pay our respects to the Buddha, right? Instead of heading to a temple, we might as well just pay respects to each other. I bow to you, and you bow to me, as the way it should be. We are all Buddhas. The nature of Buddha resides in every single one of us. Huineng, 638–713, the sixth patriarch or sixth ancestor in Zen Buddhism, brought Buddhism to the masses in China like nobody else. He is a central figure in Chinese Buddhism because he broke free from the elite and intellectual circles and made Buddhist teachings accessible to the common people. He led a revolution in Buddhist thinking. Huineng said, "Even the average Joe can be wise, and the smartest of the smart may not have a clue." Basically, you must not wait to be saved by another. Instead, you must save yourself. His ideas are pretty straightforward. Mao Zedong was not one to dish out compliments very often, especially when it came to past Chinese intellectuals, but he praised Huineng several times. Mao once said, "A great idealist philosopher emerged in the Tang dynasty. Though he was illiterate, his thoughts were profound." His Platform Sutra is a Buddhist scripture for the people. When I read those words, I knew Chairman Mao really understood the topic with his on-point praise, suggesting that Huineng revolutionized Buddhist thinking. If Buddhism had stayed stuck in those small scholarly circles, it would never have become authentically Chinese. Being Chinese means that it has a place in the heart of every Chinese person. This was made possible by Huineng. Ever since Huineng's time, we cannot have a thorough discussion about Chinese thinking without bringing up Buddhism. In fact, we cannot leave out any of the trio, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. There are a lot of Buddhist terms now hanging out in our everyday language, such as awakening, which we just talked about with the story of the disciple and his enlightened master. Other Buddhist words include karma, forces of karma, consciousness, truth, realm, and even unity of hearts and minds. All these words found their way into the Chinese language because Buddhism was adapted to become Chinese. Finally, we made it happen. We basically made Buddhist scriptures speak to us in our own language, Chinese. As a result, the Chinese got a whole bunch of new words to play with. Today, these words have become the go-to vocabulary for expressing emotions, relationships, and certain values we hold dear. Here is another common idiom related to Buddhist thinking: lay down the killing knife and instantly turn into a Buddha. What does this idiom mean? From a Buddhist perspective, you must believe in people, even if they did something really bad, perhaps morally wrong or against the law. You must not dismiss them completely because deep down, the nature of the Buddha is still inside them. As of now, they might be lost and clueless about their own nature of Buddha. This is referred to as, a foolish passing thought makes one an ordinary man, while an enlightened second thought makes one a Buddha. This enlightenment, according to Huineng, is not a slow or gradual process because it is not about accumulating knowledge. This type of enlightening or awakening is different. Either you are awakened, or you are not. There is no in-between. That is why they call it sudden awakening. Now, we can revisit the idiom, lay down the killing knife and instantly turn into a Buddha. First, even if someone has committed a crime of murder, their Buddha nature is still there. Second, with a sudden awakening, they can become enlightened just like that by letting go of their knife. As shown, Buddhist ideas have become part of our everyday language. The Chinese are shaped by the ideas of Buddhism, even if we do not consciously know it and have never read any Buddhist scriptures. The moment we start talking in Chinese, we may convey thoughts rooted in Buddhism. The next sentence we say may show Taoist philosophy. When we come up with yet another line, we may be stepping right into the realm of Confucian thought. Buddhist, Taoist, and Confucian ideas are all mixed in there in our speech. A big difference between Chinese and Western thinking is that Chinese philosophy, whether it is Confucianism, Taoism, or Buddhism, does not divide things into separate worlds. We have only one world. The way of the heaven can be found right here in people's lives. They are not some far-off, disconnected world, on the other side. Confucius said, "The way is not far from people." Two very important Confucian texts, the Great Learning and the Doctrine of the Mean, were extracted from the Book of Rites by the Cheng brothers, Cheng Yi and Cheng Hao, who lived in the 11th century during the Song dynasty. After the Great Learning and the Doctrine of the Mean became independent work that could stand on their own, they became known as part of the Four Books, along with Mencius and the Analects. Some years later, another Song dynasty scholar named Zhu Xi, 1130 to 1200, added detailed explanations and annotations to the Four Books. The usual order of reading is to start with the Great Learning, then move on to the Doctrine of the Mean, followed by the Analects, and finally the Mencius. The Great Learning is usually read first because it is like the gate through which you enter the world of learning and developing your moral character. Most Chinese scholars know this line. The way of great learning consists in making illustrious virtue manifest, connecting with the people, and abiding in the highest good. These are the three guidelines. In just a simple sentence, they capture the heart and soul of Chinese culture and philosophy. Now, let's break it down. What does making illustrious virtue manifest mean? What exactly is illustrious virtue? It is like having a kind and caring heart that comes naturally to us. It is something we all have, just like the innocence of a child. A truly distinguished person never loses that childlike heart, a pure and innate quality. Remember the previous Zen Buddhism-related discussion about the Buddha nature that resides within everyone? The Confucian concept of illustrious virtue is similar to what Zen Buddhism calls Buddha nature, something that every person is born with. Mencius was actually the first to focus on this. He said that the human heart has four inherent virtues: compassion, shame, courtesy, and a sense of right and wrong. These qualities are part of our original nature, and that is what illustrious virtue means.